tell him what was told.
My mind's going blank. I'm only kidding.
Blank mind.
It didn't take long.
No,
Okay.
2 seconds.
Okay. We're here at Tinton Falls Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy with Dr. Kim Kugan again to talk about the overhead athlete and shoulders. And Mark, what were you saying about Kim earlier? Was she went to college? What was the?
Oh, yeah, I was very impressed with Kim's, her pedigree as far as her education is concerned. I went to a very prestigious university, and I think that Bill Cosby, he wasn't part of your class. Now you're way too young for that. But anyway, yeah, Kim, apparently she got I think it was a 40 in math and a 20 in verbal from her SAT, and she could have gone anywhere, but she chose Temple. And we're happy for it. Actually, Temple's a very good school.
Thank you for that, Mark.
It's a very good school. One of the best ones that's surrounded by barbed wire. Is it not surrounded by barbed wire?
This is true.
Not exactly in the best part of town in Philly, right?
All right. So the overhead athlete, CrossFitters, baseball players, basketball players, any athlete that's putting things over their head and doing it in an athletic manner. So shoulders are involved. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the shoulder and some important points to focus on when it comes to your training, your athletic endeavors. So Kim's going to tell us a little bit about the shoulder structure and what that is comprised of. What's the most important parts
Great.
for the overhead athlete to deal with?
You're right. So the first thing I think that is the most important for people to really understand and get to know about the shoulder is that the shoulder isn't just the round part of your upper arm here.
So
your
when I do shoulders, I'm not just doing this area.
Yeah, you're not just looking at the round part up at the top near your head and neck. So the shoulder is actually a complex or a girdle, and it is made up of 4 actual joints, not just the one that we perceive to be the shoulder. And although that glenohumeral joint, the round part of our shoulder, is the primary joint, it also has a shoulder blade joint, which is on the back where the shoulder blade or the scapula lays on the back ribs. And then there's also your joint that is called your sternoclavicular joint. That's sort of at the base of your neck, at the top of your chest.
Collarbone area.
And the inner collarbone area. And then at the end of your collarbone, where it meets what we think of as the shoulder, the glenohumeral joint.
That's the ball and socket.
Yeah.
When you say, what's the
Glenohumeral joint is your ball and socket joint.
Okay.
And so those are the 4 actual joints that make up the shoulder girdle.
What was the last one you were just saying?
That's the AC joint, okay, and that's at the end of the collarbone, and it kind of meets the actual other piece of the shoulder blade. So to keep it simple, it's good to know that there are 4 joints. So when you're looking at the shoulder, it's not, you can't really just look at it through a telescope and narrow it down to, okay, everything is going on right at this one particular spot, because all of those joints and all the structures that kind of surround the joints, like the muscles and the ligaments, they all work together to make and perform those functional overhead movements, those diagonal movements, everything we do from day to day, at home or work, and also especially with our sports and our activities like that, where we're overhead lifting.
So if we named an exercise, would you be able to tell us which joint in the shoulder that's going to primarily help or work?
So depending on the structures, okay, the shoulder complex works together.
Okay.
So most of all of our activities as human beings are dynamic when we move. So you're not going to isolate out specifically, okay, it's exactly this joint of my shoulder complex that is doing this action. Now, there are specific muscle actions from specific muscles and muscle groups that perform certain types of movements and activities. But when we look at the joints and the complex itself, they all depend on movement together to create the action. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there's another piece of the anatomy that's very important though. So when I told you that the ball and socket joint is our primary joint of that complex, that ball and socket joint, the actual socket part of the joint is lined with what we call the labrum, and it's basically just a tissue lining that deepens that socket. It actually provides stability for the shoulder because the shoulder has an incredible amount of movement that can be achieved there. So we always need stability with a lot of mobility, okay, to keep our joint structures and our muscles safe from injury. Typically when we develop imbalances in some of those structures, that's when things can be compromised and injuries can occur.
Is the labrum like when you were explaining it to me, I was thinking of like a shim, you know, like from a carpenter, you know, if you have something like a drawer, I have drawers at home that move all the time, so like trying to shim them so I can make it more stable, you know, so it's sort of like a sleeve. Is it something like that, where I know it's a lining and everything like that, but just because without that, would it be the case where your ball, the ball would just be free flowing, for lack of better terms, inside that socket?
Well, it would absolutely create a greater chance for it to move more. So the labrum does deepen the socket, and it acts like a shim. And your biceps actually attaches into the labrum too, as well. So if their labrum is compromised or the biceps pulls in a certain way, that can also create a risk for injury and more instability. So yes, it is like a
So you shouldn't
shim.
do too many bicep workouts a week to take it easy on the shoulder area. Mark, take it easy on the bicep.
Oh, okay.
Take it easy on those
Never.
biceps. So
Case in point.
another thing that's important though to understand is we talked about all the joints and we talked about the shimmer, but we also need to talk about the rotator cuff. And the rotator cuff is made up of 4 muscles, and they all work together to really create overhead movement of the shoulder, the throwing movements, the shoulder pressing overhead, those types of movements. And a lot of times, since we were just talking about the biceps, people will call that the 5th rotator cuff muscle because it also acts as a stabilizer to that joint, and it helps to work
So you
with
should
the
do
rotator
buys.
cuff.
We aren't saying don't do buys. You shouldn't do them as much as Mark does.
Probably a good idea.
Well, I mean, with all of these things, I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking. I always look at, if those of you who are familiar with Jersey, if not, and I'm sure you can look at a map, but I look at like the where exit 11, because we always talk about exits in New Jersey, exit 11 and the Parkway where they intersect. I always tell people, like, if you think about it, it's like the nexus of our state. I mean, everywhere, if you want to get anywhere, you can get
Exit
everywhere.
on the turnpike.
Yeah, so you got to exit.
I'm like on the Parkway.
No. So
Okay.
you got to exit. You got the turnpike. You got
Right.
the Parkway. You got 440. You got 287. You got Route 1, Route 9, 35, 36. All kind of converge right in that area.
He's a
And
real
then-
Graham McNally.
Yeah, I'm a road scholar. I know all the roads. So you think about that, right? And I was thinking about, wow, that's almost like your shoulder, because your
Yes.
shoulder, you got
Shoulder,
soup space, hip
aka
space,
exit 11,
teres
Jersey-
major, you
Jersey
got,
Turnpike.
all of that stuff.
Exit
You got the
11.
lats, the bicep, the pec minor,
Yes.
right? So all of those things all kind of converge right into your shoulder area, and it's almost like the crossroads or the intersection of the
Isn't
musculature
Jersey
in your body.
Turnpike some fucked up dance on Jersey Shore too? Like, so that makes sense. When your shoulder's messed up, you're like doing the Jersey Turnpike. It's not a good look.
Well, and you're right, because when all of those roads converge, if you look at it in that really great analogy, that's the most common place accidents can occur.
Yeah, right. It's a
Right.
highly trafficked area.
It's a highly trafficked area, okay, it is. And we didn't even start to talk about the shoulder blade muscles and how important they actually help in the health and the function of the shoulder. But when all of those things converge, and if you're loading those joints and you're loading that tissue, and if you're not in good balance, that's when you're going to create a risk for shoulder pain and injuries.
And I've got a segue. I'm just going to jump around because I think this is a segue. So, with the types of injuries, you're going to talk about the types of injuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you're going to move into sort of where the genesis of those injuries and how they occur. And what was kind of caused me to think of the segue was, when you mentioned about highly trafficked areas, right? So, when you're talking about when you get to the compensation, it's like when there's an accident. It's like when there's an accident on the turnpike in our example earlier, right?
All the other
Everybody else is going to divert, and they're going to go to the parkway, and they're going to overload the parkway, and then that's going to get blocked up, and then they're going to go someplace else. So that was it just came to mind when we started talking
way
about
of thinking about it.
It is. It really is. So, do we want to move a little bit into like the most common
Yeah.
types of injuries?
Start from.
Most common, we can start with what you see with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Since Kim does treat us, by the way, we're not just here.
Yeah.
and they're really great patients
also
and
members.
examples.
You listen to everything she says.
So, what I most commonly see with CrossFit athletes, with baseball players, basketball players, any overhead athlete, is impingement syndromes of the shoulder, just really basic pain of the shoulder, and also rotator cuff weakness or some kind of compromise with the rotator cuff. Impingement syndrome, a lot of people would say, what the heck is that? Well, we talked about how all these roads converge, okay? And there's not a lot of space there. So where your rotator cuff attaches,
Right in the front, right?
right in the front, but it runs from basically the back of your, like near your shoulder blade, where a lot of the bellies of those muscles begin, and it runs through this little tunnel created by your collarbone, the end of your collarbone, and that ball and socket joint, or what we were talking about before. And that's where your rotator cuff kind of just runs right on through. And so if there is a lot of compression or a lot of repetitive overhead use, and you're not moving in a quality movement pattern, we'll call it, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it will increase your risk of compression on the cuff. And over time, that will create what we call impingement syndrome, where that small space can develop inflammation and more pressure on the cuff. And usually, impingement syndromes, if they continue on, they will lead to some changes in how the rotator cuff
So it's
performs.
impingement would be like construction on that turnpike where they make everybody go out in one lane.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then not everyone can fit,
Like it.
and then it gets tight. So, and when it's tight like that, it increases your risk for developing shoulder pain, limitations with overhead movement, and all that diverting traffic. And that diverting traffic becomes all muscles firing that shouldn't, okay? Weakness in certain muscles, more muscles just overworking, and it will just expand into a greater traffic jam.
Like
And
I
more
was
pain.
in July 4th.
Yes. So those are the two most common that we see, and
Labrum tears.
labrum tears we see as well. They
Partials or full? Like, is
you
it little ones
usually
usually?
see partial labrum tears. It really depends on the trauma of the injury. Most labrum tears occur either from some type of traumatic injury,
Impact normally, you think?
impact of some sort, a lot of heavy overhead potentially, with either increased weight.
Is there a certain sensation that would go along with that? So somebody had that, something that happened, they would know they may have partially tore their labrum, or they should be worried about that?
So it's very difficult to differentiate, to say, okay, I did this, the front of my shoulder hurts, and it's a labrum tear. It's very difficult to differentiate that. Usually a healthcare provider could narrow it down based on the mechanism of the injury, or the symptoms that they're describing and certain things we might find on an exam.
So you shouldn't be going looking at WebMD. Like
Yeah,
this.
don't WebMD that one,
Okay, good.
because even all the research out there, people have shoulder pain. Common areas for shoulder pain, for rotator cuff, labrums, they all refer the same type of shoulder pain pattern, which is usually in the front of the shoulder and into the deltoid. So to say it's exactly this or it's exactly that, not left for the
So
inexperienced
I think
to
one of the
determine.
first things that you asked me was about my pain threshold as a person.
Mhm.
Now, is there any tools that you can give people that would kind of have them identify the kind of person they are as far as identifying their pain? Because some people are very little pains or big pains to them, whereas for
Sure.
other people, big pains or little pains to them. Like, is there some kind of way that you would describe for somebody to take it easy if this kind of pain,
Well,
Sure.
for instance, when I came here, you had me hold my hand over a candle and count 1001, 1002, and that would develop what my tolerance was.
So if you get to 10, you mean you're hardcore?
You're hardcore. You can work through it.
Just kidding, folks.
I
That
usually
might be a good test. We'll try that afterwards. We'll throw it in the video.
I usually actually just ask a few simple questions. Does someone have pain at rest? Okay, and if they have pain at rest in their normal day-to-day life, and then they have pain during an activity and it worsens, and then they have pain after, then that's probably saying something to you that maybe I shouldn't be doing the activity if it's worsening and I have pain that's lingering. The other thing is some people say, well, I don't have any pain, and I have a little bit of an ache when I'm doing it, and then, it goes away. Okay, but we want to listen to the messages we get from our body, because maybe you're flying under that threshold, but it's more about creating self-awareness and letting go of that ego,
Yeah.
because you're getting messages early that are saying something might be going on here. I need to take a look at what I'm doing. And this is when we talk about really getting back to basics. So if you're doing a very functional dynamic movement, like a thruster, or we talked
Slow it
about,
down.
or pull-ups or something where you're developing some pain and then it's going away, but something's happening, okay? Then we need to really break down to the fundamentals and see what's going on here. What is potentially causing it? Am I not using certain muscles the right way? Am I a little bit weaker in a certain group of muscles? And we'll get into that a little later.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed, because I had a labrum tear that was repaired back in October 2015. But prior to that, I was at when I was at the Granite Games, I was, practicing or getting to the Granite Games, and then eventually getting there, was practicing muscle ups, and I wasn't able to get muscle ups because I would get them and then they would go away, and I would think it's just because that particular movement is a very difficult movement, and it's a perishable skill. If you don't continue to work on it, it can leave you like that. But what I was finding, my left shoulder, that when I was trying to, like the gymnasts don't call them muscle ups, they call it getting up on the rings. So when I was getting up on the rings, as I was coming through to get into that dip position in the ring, my left elbow would always fly out. I was never able to keep it tucked. Mm-hmm. And is that something that would have been caused by the torn labrum?
Potentially, because what happens is, and you're a great example of this, Mark, is that when we do have, say, like a tissue that's injured, like maybe the labrum is slightly torn, maybe the rotator cuff has some slight or partial tear or full tear, which is a perfect example you are in. What happens is you start to use other musculature and you learn how to compensate. Our bodies are brilliant. You will figure out, your brain will figure out a way to get from point A to point B and finish the task. Now, does it mean you're going to do it right? No.
Right.
And when we do things like that, you can actually worsen the situation. So we're thinking, okay, well, I can still get myself overhead, or I can still, do that, but you're not doing yourself a service.
So depending on what your goals are.
And it's all about your goals.
So if you're playing in your last Super Bowl, or whatever, then it might be worth that injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're just training for the day, then it's probably not worth it.
And that also your reference before about the toaster or about the French toast. I don't know. That's a risk of being redundant. We said this before, and it kind of is apropos right now. So, like Kelly Starrett said, we're a very task-oriented society, or just human beings in general, are very task-oriented. So we'll figure out how to lift that weight, or how to get up on the rings, or how to, deadlift 500 pounds if that's what we want to do. And his analogy was, it's like, if you do a deadlift and you do it incorrectly, you compensate and you injure yourself and you slip a couple discs, and now you're, maybe you don't deadlift anymore, or maybe, whatever kind of injury that you cause upon yourself. It's as similar to, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're going to drop that and you're going to be like, yes, you'll be in traction yelling, I'm a 500-pound deadlifter. But it's the equivalent of your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend coming and saying, hey, I made you some wonderful French toast this morning, but I burned the kitchen down. So You know, we were task oriented. We wanted to, we wanted to make that French toast, and we did. But we just completely compromised half of the house in the process, and that's
How great would that French toast really be?
yeah, really. It's the French toast at the end of the day. It's probably not worth it.
Exactly. Well, and I think, like, from your perspective, this is okay for sharing, but like you have a rotator cuff tear, but you can throw up 135 pounds over your head. So you're gonna figure
So
out
a
a way
little background
to do it.
to that, we did the sevens. If you guys are CrossFit and you know what that workout is, it's a pretty intense shoulder workout. Mark did that with a full rotator cuff tear this past Saturday. 7 handstand push-ups, 7 thrusters at 135 pounds, 7 knee to elbows, 7 deadlifts,
7 burpees.
7 burpees, 7
kettlebell
overhead kettlebell
swings.
swings, 7 pull-ups, 7 rounds.
Yeah, wasn't
And
fast.
you did
but-
that with warming up thoroughly for
No,
okay.
I had to get in and get out because it was my daughter's birthday party. So I just
Get the task done.
yeah, I had to risk burning down the kitchen.
Well, and as a physical therapist, I'm having heart palpitations about it.
Well, my
But-
theory on that was probably not one that anyone should subscribe to, but it was like, I can't tear it 110%. So
But that does go to kind of showcase what it is that the body's capable of doing and compensating for that lack of somewhere else. It's going to find it.
yeah,
I think that's something that's important now as far as goals and getting to somewhere you want to get to too.
Yes.
Because you can do that elsewhere in your life, not just physically, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of other things. Where there's a will, there's a way, and obviously Mark had the will to do the workout,
Yeah.
and his body found a way.
And so I think another important thing to talk about, and you're a great example of this, is compensations. And we tend to, obviously we know that injuries can occur because of compensations. And one of the primary things I see as a therapist when people come in with shoulder pain is we have many shoulder blade muscles where our shoulder blade lies against our back ribs. And our middle trapezius, our lower trapezius, and a muscle called our serratus anterior are 3 of those big shoulder blade muscles that really help create scapular or shoulder blade stability. And that shoulder blade stability is essential and vital to help keep our rotator cuff intact and help basically provide great overhead quality movement.
And now, if you could label those muscles in general population terms as being, you think they're weak?
They are inhibited typically, or weak, okay? They are just lazy muscles.
Why is that, you think?
They just don't like to fire.
Because of this kind of hunched over?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from even just our posture, our lever system as a human being. We're a big 3rd-class lever system, the way our bodies are designed, so we're
Explain
not
that a little
exactly.
more.
So,
3rd-class citizens, us human beings.
yeah, we're 3rd class here. But basically, how our body handles loads and how we move, we aren't the most efficient just by the way we are created. So, given that, we have muscles that help really stabilize our body, and then we have muscles that, that are constantly firing, and other muscles that are like, well, if you're gonna do that, I'm gonna take the lazy man's route, and I'm just gonna hang out.
Now, is that, I mean, there's a lot of talk about evolution and whatever it is that people that you believe in, but say humans are kind of designed to be lazy and overeaters because they want to preserve as much energy as possible. Do you think that's probably why we tend to move
We probably,
lazily?
I think our body takes the path of least resistance.
Yeah, certainly.
So if a muscle's used to overworking, that's what it knows to do. That's what our brain and our muscle are, what we call in the therapy world, the neuromotor system or the neuromuscular system. That's what that brain has trained that muscle to do. So it's going to easily always do that. And the other muscles that aren't used to working, they're like, no problem, we'll just sit and hang out.
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
With the most simple things, with people who've never done a lunge before, and they're so used to trying to use their back to stand up instead of their legs, and it's that's, you gotta coach them hard.
So I think one major focus for people to help avoid the incidence of shoulder pain and shoulder injury is making sure that those inhibited muscles, which we call the scapular stabilizers or the shoulder blade stabilizers, are strong, are active, because they help control that overhead movement. So just to,
How would you describe the shoulder blade movement?
so I was actually just
Yeah,
going to
good,
say that
good.
because I feel like we need to talk about that really
Right.
quick. So when you have your shoulder blade goes up, it goes down, it goes in towards the spine, it goes out away from the spine, and it also rotates up and it rotates down. So I like Mark's visuals as
I'm
he's
just trying to
doing.
picture
We're
it.
shrugging,
It's
we're
like,
moving, we're shimmying. I feel
Yeah.
like we should put some
That's probably a great
70s
warm-up,
music
just
on
like-
for you.
Right? Protraction, retraction, right?
Well, exactly that
Yeah.
actually. So sometimes these inhibited muscles, these middle, lower traps serratus, they all help with controlling the upward rotation of the scapula or the shoulder blade, the actual elevation of the shoulder blade, and they help control all those movements so that they're not moving so fast in one direction and uncontrollable. And so actually just teaching them how to fire by simple, retractions, protractions, sort of upward movements and, different types of shrug movements, that alone can help get them firing so that way when you go to do a dynamic, pull up or overhead movement, they're ready and they're ready to actually fire, okay? Because they all need to work together. They all need to be like a unit when they're firing. And so a lot of times what happens is when these muscles are asleep, okay, these shoulder blade muscles, the shoulder blade will just move so quickly in elevation that it will cause the head of that ball and socket joint to slam into the top of the joint. And what it's really slamming into is your rotator cuff.
And
Okay.
that would impinge that.
And that's going to
rotator
impinge
bone.
that cuff and that, and potentially that labrum and everything like that. And so that's really the meat and potatoes of it is those shoulder blade muscles, and I've even showed it on you, with how it's tilted a certain way, it's not firing a certain way. They don't control it. And so if you're doing highly repetitive overhead movements and you're not creating that balance and that sort of control during the elevation, you're going to slam on that cuff and eventually have shoulder pains.
So is that happening in pitchers in baseball? They get a lot of throws and the muscles get fatigued and from that slamming.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was something that we were talking earlier before we started the podcast today about exercises and things that are not commonly performed in like when I was bodybuilding years ago, we used to do a thing called, I think it was Scap Jacks. I think you and I talked about that, where we could do it on a bar on a pull-up bar, but I was doing it on the lat pull down. I would get the lat pull down and I would try to get it pretty heavy, not too heavy, but heavy enough, and just hold myself on that bar and just pull, just let my scapula pull my scap down. Just pull my scap down, come up. So you do that. I do that too when I was warming up post surgery for my left shoulder. Just hanging and just doing scap jacks or serratus punches, stuff like that. So these things are, they're integral in the supporting the shoulder joint, and shouldn't be overlooked and should be trained.
Absolutely. I mean, they're really essential. Okay.
And
And
we have a before burners now we're gonna have. It's afterburners and before.
Yeah, we might have to have
a quick before burner.
Yeah. Pre-burner.
A pre-burner, but a pre-burner would be great, even if it's 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Warm
when
them
you were
up,
just
get 'em
ready,
going.
before when I was doing it, I'm like, okay, well, what exercises? And I'm sitting here and as I'm moving, I'm like, okay, you could do band, to wrap a band around the rig, sit on the floor, and just retract back that way. Is that could be one
Absolutely.
of them? Just off. I think we did some stuff here where it was from a push-up position.
and just doing
where
shrugs.
Just doing shrugs from push-up position.
Protractions and retractions.
So all these things are mobilization, activation exercises that are also going to support the athlete in performing the movements that are necessary for his or her sports.
Another thing that's important too, because think about it. Do most people drive to the gym? They do, right?
Yeah.
So what are you doing in a car? You have your arms. You hopefully are driving with your hands on the steering wheel.
Where's your ideal hand place in being a physical therapist for us, for the people.
Are
And
you at 11 and 2, 6 and
No, should we-
9 and
oh,
3?
right.
I'm a here. I'm a lower.
Oh, yeah.
I
Down
don't
like
do
this,
a 10
though?
and 2.
With your hands- with your
Like
hands-
lower. I do lower and usually just hold the steering wheel like
So
this.
with supinated grip,
Supinated grip.
which means palms up.
Yes. But the way the steering wheel is curved, it's usually you're kind of halfway between supination and pronation. If you're like this.
Okay, yeah.
So depending on the wheel.
So you're neutral.
Yes.
Well, that's
Fairly
actually,
neutral.
now that you're talking about wheels, I mean, and not that we're getting off topic, because it was actually not. When I had my surgery, just steering, coming across this way, or when prior to surgery, just having a compromised rotator cuff, you can feel it. Like I can feel when if I'm coming from, say, 3 counterclockwise to 12, once I get into that position, that would be an internal rotation position, I can feel the my rotator cuff, front of my shoulder. I can feel the pain in that. Like
Well,
just
and
a tweak.
a big reason for that is when you go across the body like that, you're compromising the space even more.
So causing even a greater an impingement.
Exactly.
What is that dance called?
Uh,
The kids are doing nowadays?
oh, I don't know.
The dab or something?
I thought you were gonna do the shopping
Oh.
cart.
What is that called? The dab, right? Something like
Oh,
that.
that one?
No, the whip shit, right?
Oh.
The whip.
No, I
Oh, I
don't
should
know.
know that.
I'm not hip to the game right anymore.
Yeah.
You're
So-
impinging your shoulders, kids. Don't do that.
Yeah, they're not doing that where I hang out at the American Legion or the VFW.
But when people are driving too, okay, I mean, most people, like, you drive, they work on computers, they're on iPhones, they're on, tablets. Everything's in front of our body, okay? Our pecs get tight, that contributes to basically forward movement of that ball and socket joint, and it creates impingement.
Even holding the cell phones, I see the kids, they're like hunched over, shoulders collapsed, sitting there, back rounded.
Douchebag shoulder syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just forever on their whatever, their Droid or their iPhone.
Right.
And that's right. We talked about practice makes permanent. Practice doesn't make perfect.
does, right.
So then you're going to be permanently, walking around. We're going to see a lot of people hunched around with rounded shoulders in the future if people
Well,
don't
and
fix their posture.
it's something to think about because it's not just about what you're doing if you're at the gym or in your day. It's all about your lifestyle day to day. Like if you think about all those things contribute too.
Oh, you should see when I
So-
drink a beer. I am completely in
Upright.
external
You're a
rotation.
little overextended though with your. So now practice is a good. I think it's something good to talk about too. Is you practice physical therapy.
Yes.
I think I think people need to understand that they practice CrossFit. They
Life.
practice weightlifting. Right? It's a practice. It's trying to get better at. You're not. You aren't there. You're never really going to get there. There is the top of the mountain, and I don't think most people are getting to the top of the mountain, right? So
Sure.
having that mindset going into your training, into your sport, into whatever it may be, is important too.
And we're constantly working on the fundamentals. I've been practicing for almost 19 years and I still work on the fundamentals. Gets me to the next step.
Just like
You know?
football, right? Blocking, tackling.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the blocking and tackling, like these little things, working on these little things are almost like the blocking and tackling for your particular sport.
It is because you have to develop self-awareness in what you're doing. It's the greatest tool to prevent injury. It really is. So, and people are lucky with the coaching support they have, especially in the CrossFit community. Like if your coaches are there to support you, to help teach you technique, to kind of be that second set of eyes, because when you're doing the activity yourself, it's hard to see where you are, right? I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yes.
So, having that support, and then sort of saying, all right, well, if this stuff isn't really completely working, then, some of these muscles aren't firing right, I'm seeing this, then break it down. Start some isolated strengthening of those things, and then bring it into the dynamic activity and see if it's changed your movement pattern.
Now, would you recommend from a coach for the coaches like Rob and myself? And I think before when you were describing how the scapula moves, right? And I kind of closed my eyes. It's called right, and then moving. It's that proprioception, right? So I want to know where my understanding and feeling where my body is in space, right? So, would you think that this would be a good, something good for for athletes and, overhead athletes, CrossFit athletes to, before when I was recommending how to, perform a, just a shrug seated or in a plank position or a serratus punch, right? To close your eyes, to feel, to try to imagine which way your scapula is moving, which way
Yes.
your shoulder blade is moving. Okay, okay, I can feel that
Yeah,
now.
whole
So that they
mind-muscle
can,
connection.
yeah, so they can
That visual
create that,
imagery,
yeah.
if you can close off that sense, that like the actual, knock off the visual sense and then just use that guided imagery to do it. That's the best way to do it because you'll connect with more of that tactile and movement component of what you're trying to focus on. So definitely.
I bet there's a lot of resources out there somewhere, which I'm going to look for now. That this talking about where they have the anatomy and they show it going through certain motions of what it does. And it kind of shows the bones and muscles and what they do.
Yeah.
I think seeing that and then visualizing yourself going through that stuff would be probably a nice little tool.
Yeah, there's got to be something on the web for that.
Plenty.
Otherwise, we'll have to have Kim make it.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is it's curious to me personally. So, as I mentioned before, I had bilateral ACL, and that took a little while. It wasn't as quick as the shoulders.
ACL's knee.
Yeah, ACL, your anterior cruciate ligament, both knees. So I had both knees, ACL reconstructions in both knees.
Which is a very common injury nowadays because of the conditioning of most people. I'm sure
And the
you see
lack
it a
of
lot.
core stability.
Yeah.
A lot of risk of ACL injury. A lot of what they're finding, especially in adolescence,
A lot of kids,
Yeah,
is
yes.
because of lack of core
Soccer
stability.
players.
Yeah.
But that's going to be one of our topics in the future. So let's hold
More to
on.
come on that
Yes,
one.
stay
I think
tuned.
we do some video stuff with like landing mechanics too. Would be good with it. Anyways, write
So
it down.
the question that I had selfishly was October 12th, 2015. That was the left shoulder. All right, and that was the labrum tear had a supraspinatus was 100% torn, the infraspinatus was 70% torn. I had partially torn bicipital tendon. So now we're fast forward to 18 months or so, to give or take, right? Right shoulder. Actually, it was quicker than that because I probably did the right shoulder somewhere in maybe March, and March or April is when I was diagnosed with it. And so, do you see, is it common for athletes when they talk about compensation and overcompensation? Is it common, or do you see it a lot in athletes where they'll injure one side, and then they'll get that surgically repaired, and all of a sudden the other side will go because of compensation, or am I just special?
You're just special.
He's like, I knew it. Thank you.
Special.
That's all I wanted to hear.
Probably because, and the reason I say this is there's a lot of factors, especially with rotator cuff injuries. Age is a factor. I mean, we all know you're really young, but
Yes.
still, age is a factor. And the truth of the matter is, as we age, usually in the 4th and 5th decades of life, most of us are going to have some wear and tear on their cuffs. And depending on the type of sport-specific activities you do, might warrant whether or not something would happen bilaterally or just on one side.
Is there wear and tear in the cuffs without doing activity?
Yes.
Probably more so. Huh?
Yeah, because our whole life we use our cuffs with anything we're doing, carrying children, driving,
Brushing your hair.
brushing your hair, putting clothes on. Anything you do, it's very active. So
I was just surprised because growing up playing sports growing up, I was a catcher, so knees. That's probably one of the reasons why I look back. Plus, military jumping out of airplanes probably doesn't have that's not something that's recommended that normal people do. Anyway, but from a sports a standpoint, throws all the time. Not that I was a pitcher, but every time the pitcher threw the ball, catcher's got to throw a ball too, right? So. So that plus playing football.
Probably harder to throw too, being squatted to throw down to second base than it is pitching, letting your full body move. Probably much harder on the actual joint, I would think too.
And that's what's surprising to me is that why this went to second, why this one went to second.
No. For me, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim. That makes more sense to me. Because that has had a lot of strengthening throughout your.
Okay,
You know what
I
I
didn't
mean?
look at it from there yet, from that
and
perspective.
it's your dominant side, your
Yeah.
right hand dominant. So you probably actually stabilize more on this side, just from always using it and you know how your
So
movement
my overhead
patterns are.
squat is really good. My right hand, left hand.
Well, how about, that's another one other thing is sleeping, because I remember having problems with my shoulder long time ago, like when pterodactyls flew. And I went to the doctor, and I went
Just click.
so I went to the witch doctor. So
Yeah,
I
I'm,
went-
Put some needles in it.
You a little tired?
No, I'm just like,
It took a good solid
oh
5
my-
seconds to click.
Like, what's he saying?
So I was sleeping like that, and actually to the point where my doctor recommended, which I tried once because it's like it was like sleeping in a straitjacket, but to take a T-shirt and put your arm inside the T-shirt and sleep so that you'll stop going
a
like
general doctor?
yeah.
It wasn't a PT.
No,
No, it
definitely
wasn't
not.
a PT.
What would you recommend
PT.
sleeping posture-wise? On your back?
You know,
Hands folded across your chest like Dracula?
Upside down.
I think you sleep however you get sleep. So I mean, the most supportive sleep postures are either lying on your back. Some people even put pillows underneath their knees, or lying on your side and putting even sometimes pillows between your legs. People like that kind of support. Anytime you put your arm overhead, anytime your arm is in an awkward posture, or if you're in a full end range of motion, which would be your elbow completely flexed
Yeah, I
or bent
question a lot of
and
people
way
like that.
overhead, you're liable to just compromise some of the musculature and even some of the nerves that run down the length of the arm. So that's, people always say, I woke up and my pinkies or my hands were numb. Well, were you sleeping with your arms completely
You just
bent?
sleep like that little, like, that fetal type curled in position with their arms in all
Yeah.
tight, and they can't extend their arms out.
Yeah.
So that doesn't
happens.
that's not a compromising position to contribute to a shoulder injury.
That is with your arm hanging like
Well,
that.
no. I mean,
we're sleeping on it.
sleeping
Yeah.
like this, because I do find myself all the time with this arm out. It's almost like, just imagine that I'm doing a side stroke in a pool.
Yeah. It's true.
So I'm like this, and then
Just
I
not
wake
good.
up. I'm like, I used to wake up, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. So.
Well, because you're at an end range in your shoulder joint. You're compressing it. This is actually an impingement position
Right.
with your arm directly overhead.
So you got full range of motion sleep.
Yeah.
Full range, well,
Yeah,
this
so
is doing
this
a full
is-
range of motion.
Yeah, that's actually very
I won't get
compressive.
no rep on my sleep. So that is something that some folks
Yeah.
should be concerned with.
They should be. I mean, anytime you have a shoulder pain too, due to the contact stress of lying on that injured shoulder, it's going to probably be difficult to lay on that side. Because when you lay on something and you're compressing it, you're decreasing the blood flow to that area. And if you have tissue that's impaired or compromised and you're not getting proper blood flow to it, you're going to feel it even more. That's how it kind of works.
So what's the Kim Kukin method of waking up in the morning and making have proper blood flow?
Rise and shine, get up and
You
do the
like
grind,
stretch,
is that what we
do you,
say?
like, move around, what do you do?
Put your feet on the floor and reach for the stars.
Honestly, simply, what I do
You
usually,
pandiculate?
I usually just make sure at first, spinal mobility is number one. So
Yeah,
just, before I even jump out of bed, I usually just move my knees side to side, get my arms, just move them up and down, shrug my shoulders, do whatever I need to do, loosen up. And then I actually usually roll to my side and then sit myself up. Maybe that's all the years of PT training, just so I'm not shocking my body, because my body's been static for how many
So
hours?
you roll to your side and sit up.
And then I sit up. So I roll like
so,
a log.
So you don't just like
I don't
rise
just-
up like a.
I don't jump up.
When I wake up
'Cause I
in the
don't wanna
morning,
startle my body.
when I wake up in the morning, I'm usually grabbing my wallet, calling Uber, and getting the hell out of where I am.
You're there, you're like, God, another day.
So, and then usually actually then I stand up. And shower's a great place to loosen up too, You've
Yeah.
got, warm water, heat, it's more relaxing, get yourself moving a little bit.
And
Ease into your day.
Move slowly, folks, because it's a
Yeah.
slippery, wet surface.
It is.
Don't do jumping jacks in the shower,
Yeah.
you're saying?
Don't literally jump in the shower.
So,
That's a good reason to keep yourself healthy and mobile and stable.
So you can
It's
shower.
things like when you slip, you don't get hurt.
Oh yeah.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Because that happened to me this past when I slipped and I thought for sure, just caught myself in a weird spot and was like, okay. I was like, wow. imagine if I was deconditioned and not, active, how much that could be a big issue.
But I've seen, I'm sorry, I've seen like, what's his name? Branch Warren. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Branch Warren. He's
fell off a horse?
Yeah, he fell off a horse. Great. That was great. But
Look
Branch
at you.
Warren, yeah, YouTube that. Branch Warren falling off a horse. He was walking, and this isn't the first bodybuilder that I heard. So to your point, the strengthening, it's a good thing, but being too strong might be a bad thing because these guys slipped, tried to recover, flexed their muscles so much they've detached from detached from their
You don't
bone.
think that has to do with all the steroids around?
It could be,
Okay.
and being dry too. Like these guys going into
Yeah,
bodybuilding
yeah.
shows, so they're dehydrated. They try to get all the subcutaneous water out. And it's
I'm not saying all bodybuilders should do steroids,
Right.
but the top level guys is pretty prevalent.
And
so.
these guys are. When you're like 5'10", 305 pounds, and you're 3.5% body fat. Yeah, it's probably not. You're probably not getting